Independence Day has always been my favorite holiday. The barbecues, the fireworks, the sense of community. It all comes together to create the perfect summer celebration. But last year's 4th of July changed everything for me. For context, I'm a 26-year-old female, about 5'6", and fairly fit. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Every year, my friends and I would gather at the local park for the town's annual 4th of July festivities. There were games, food stalls, live music, and of course, the grand fireworks display that everyone looked forward to. Last year started off like any other. My friends and I arrived at the park around noon, setting up our blankets and chairs in our usual spot. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and everyone was in high spirits. As the day went on, we played some games, ate way too much junk food, and caught up with people we hadn't seen in a while. Everything seemed perfect. As dusk approached, the excitement for the fireworks began to build. People started claiming their spots, and the park filled with a sea of blankets and lawn chairs. My friends and I settled in, ready for the show. The first fireworks lit up the sky around 9 p.m., and everyone cheered. It was a beautiful display, just like every year. Halfway through the fireworks, I noticed something odd. There was a man standing near the edge of the park, away from the crowd. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, and seemed out of place. At first, I thought he was just a stranger passing by, but something about him made me uneasy. He was holding a large duffel bag, and he kept glancing around nervously. I pointed him out to my friend Sarah, but she brushed it off. "Probably just a loner who came to watch the fireworks," she said. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the grand finale approached, the man started moving closer to the crowd. My heart began to race. I kept my eyes on him, my unease growing with each step he took. He reached into his duffel bag, and my blood ran cold. I saw the glint of metal, a large flashlight. The fireworks ended, and the crowd started to disperse. I kept glancing back at the man, who seemed to be watching us. "Let's get out of here," I told Sarah. We gathered our things and began walking to the parking lot, trying to blend in with the crowd. As we reached the outskirts of the park, I noticed the man following us. I nudged Sarah and whispered, "He's behind us." She looked back, and her face went pale. "Let's walk faster," she suggested, and we quickened our pace. The man kept following. We turned onto a quieter street, hoping to lose him, but he turned as well. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. "We need to get to the car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We were about 2 blocks away from the parking lot when the man called out to us. "Hey, you dropped something," he shouted. We ignored him and kept walking. "I said, you dropped something," he repeated, his voice more insistent. I glanced back and saw him getting closer. "Run," I told Sarah, and we both took off. We sprinted down the street, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the night. I could hear the man running behind us, his heavy breathing growing louder. We rounded a corner and saw the parking lot up ahead. My car was in sight, and I fumbled for my keys. We reached the car, and I quickly unlocked it. Sarah jumped into the passenger seat, and I slid behind the wheel, my hands shaking as I started the engine. Just as the car roared to life, the man appeared at the edge of the parking lot. He slowed down, realizing he wouldn't catch us. I threw the car into reverse, backed out of the spot, and sped out of the lot. My heart was racing, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror to make sure he wasn't following us. We drove straight to the police station and reported the incident. The officers took our statements and assured us they would patrol the area. I don't know if they ever found the man, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched for weeks after. That night changed me. The 4th of July used to be a day of celebration, but now it serves as a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. I still love fireworks and barbecues, but the sense of security I once felt is gone. I'm more cautious, more aware of my surroundings, and every year, when the fireworks light up the sky, I can't help but think of that man and the terror he brought to our small town. The 4th of July was always a big deal for my family. Every year we'd pack up our gear and head to Lake Clearwater, a popular campground a few hours from our home. It was a tradition my parents started when I was a kid, and now, as a 30-year-old, I looked forward to it every summer. My sister, Megan, and her husband, Dave, joined us, along with their 2 kids, Lily and Jack. This year, however, would be a 4th of July we'd never forget. We arrived at the campground on the morning of the 3rd, eager to set up and start our long weekend. The place was bustling with families, all looking forward to the fireworks show over the lake. We found our usual spot near the water, set up our tents, and got everything ready. The weather was perfect, and we spent the day swimming, fishing, and playing games with the kids. That evening, we settled around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. As the sun set, we could hear the distant sound of laughter and music from other campsites. It was the perfect start to the holiday weekend. The next day, we joined in the campground's festivities. There were games, contests, and a parade for the kids. Everyone was in high spirits, enjoying the beautiful weather and the sense of community. As the day turned into evening, we prepared for the fireworks. We spread out our blankets and lawn chairs on the beach, ready for the show. The fireworks started just after dark, and they were as spectacular as ever. Bursts of color lit up the sky, reflecting off the lake and filling the air with a symphony of booms and crackles. Lily and Jack were mesmerized, their faces glowing with excitement. It was a perfect moment. After the show, we headed back to our campsite. The kids were exhausted, so Megan and Dave put them to bed in their tent. The rest of us sat around the campfire, enjoying the cool night air and the lingering smell of fireworks. We talked and laughed, reliving old memories and making new ones. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night. As I was putting out the fire, I heard a rustling noise coming from the edge of the woods. I glanced over, expecting to see a raccoon or some other nocturnal animal, but I saw nothing. I shrugged it off and finished dousing the fire. I had just crawled into my tent when I heard Megan's voice. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" I asked, sitting up. "Listen," she said. We all strained our ears, and that's when we heard it. A faint, high-pitched whimpering sound. It sounded like a child. "Maybe it's one of the kids," Dave suggested. But when we checked, Lily and Jack were sound asleep in their tent. The whimpering continued, growing louder and more frantic. It was coming from the direction of the woods. My heart started to race. "We should check it out," I said, grabbing a flashlight. Megan, Dave, and I headed toward the sound, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. As we approached the tree line, the whimpering turned into sobbing. "Hello," Megan called out. "Is someone there?" We pushed deeper into the woods, and that's when we saw her. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, sitting on the ground, hugging her knees and crying. Her clothes were dirty and torn, and she looked terrified. "Hey, it's okay," Megan said softly, kneeling beside the girl. "What's your name?" "Sophie," the girl sobbed. "I'm lost." "Where are your parents, Sophie?" Dave asked. "I don't know," she cried. "I was with them, and then I couldn't find them." My heart ached for the girl. We assured her that we would help her find her parents, and led her back to our campsite. Megan wrapped her in a blanket while Dave went to inform the campground staff. The staff immediately organized a search party. They checked the registration records but couldn't find any family with a missing child named Sophie. As the night wore on, more and more people joined the search, but no one came forward to claim Sophie. Sophie clung to Megan, refusing to let go. "I don't want to go back out there," she whispered. "He'll find me." "Who?" Megan asked gently. "The man," Sophie replied, her voice trembling. "The man who took me." A chill ran down my spine. "What man, Sophie?" "He said he was going to take me to my parents, but he lied," she sobbed. "He brought me into the woods and left me there." The search party redoubled their efforts, combing through the woods for any sign of the man Sophie described. The rest of us stayed with Sophie, trying to keep her calm and safe. The hours ticked by with no sign of the man or Sophie's parents. Just before dawn, the police arrived. They took Sophie into protective custody and began their investigation. We later learned that Sophie had been reported missing from a town over 50 miles away. The police believed that her abductor had brought her to our campground, thinking it would be easier to hide among the holiday crowds. The rest of our trip was a blur. The joyous atmosphere of the 4th of July was replaced with an uneasy tension. We packed up and left early, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had settled over us. That 4th of July changed everything. The campground, once a place of happy memories, now held a sinister shadow. The 4th of July had always been a special time for our family. For as long as I can remember, we'd spend the holiday at my grandparents' lake house, nestled deep in the woods, right on the shore of Lake Greenwood. It was the perfect getaway. The lake house was a rustic 2-story cabin with a large deck overlooking the water. It was a place where we could escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life and enjoy the peace and tranquility of nature. This year, it was just my older brother Tom and me. I'm 24, about 5'7", and fairly athletic, while Tom is 27 and built like a linebacker. Our parents had decided to take a trip abroad, so Tom and I thought it would be a great opportunity to relive some of our favorite childhood memories at the lake house. We arrived on the morning of the 3rd, excited to spend a few days swimming, fishing, and just relaxing. The first day was perfect. We spent most of it out on the lake, swimming and kayaking. As the sun began to set, we started preparing for the next day's festivities. We had a cooler full of food, plenty of drinks, and a stash of fireworks ready to go. The lake house was secluded, with the nearest neighbor about a mile away, so we knew we wouldn't bother anyone with our celebrations. That night, after a long day in the sun, we were exhausted. We sat on the deck, watching the moonlight dance on the water, and reminisced about past 4th of July celebrations. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water against the shore and the distant chirping of crickets. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night. Tom headed upstairs to his room, and I stayed on the main floor in the living room, where I had set up a makeshift bed on the couch. I had just drifted off to sleep when I heard a noise. It was faint, but enough to jolt me awake. I sat up, listening intently. There it was again, a soft rustling like footsteps on gravel. I got up and quietly made my way to the window. The moon provided just enough light for me to see the outline of the driveway, but I couldn't make out any details. I told myself it was probably just an animal and tried to shake off the unease. I was about to head back to the couch when I heard the sound again, this time closer. I crept over to the front door and peeked through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat. There was a figure standing just beyond the porch, partially obscured by shadows. It was too dark to make out any features, but I could see they were holding something. A flashlight, maybe? I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Should I wake Tom? Call the police? As I stood there, paralyzed with indecision, the doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. My blood ran cold. I turned and sprinted up the stairs to Tom's room, shaking him awake. "Tom, there's someone outside," I whispered urgently. "What?" He mumbled, still groggy. "There's someone at the door. They're trying to get in," I repeated. Tom was instantly alert. He grabbed a baseball bat he kept by his bed and motioned for me to stay behind him. We crept back down the stairs, every creak of the old wood sounding deafening in the silence. The rattling had stopped, but we could hear footsteps on the porch. Tom signaled for me to call the police, and I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. As I dialed, Tom approached the door cautiously. He peeked through the peephole and then turned back to me, his expression grim. "It's a man," he whispered. "He's just standing there, looking at the door." The 911 operator answered, and I quickly explained the situation. They assured me that officers were on their way, but given the remote location, it would take some time. I relayed this to Tom, and we both knew we had to hold out until they arrived. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The man had thrown something, a rock maybe, at one of the windows, shattering the glass. Panic surged through me. Tom tightened his grip on the bat and positioned himself between me and the door. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. We heard the crunch of broken glass as the man climbed through the window. Tom and I backed away, moving toward the kitchen where we had a clear path to the back door if we needed to make a run for it. The man stepped into the living room, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He was tall, wearing dark clothing, and his face was partially covered by a hood. He scanned the room, and then his flashlight landed on us. "Get out," Tom shouted, raising the bat. "The police are on their way." The man paused, seemingly unfazed. He took a step forward, and Tom swung the bat, hitting the man's arm. The intruder grunted in pain, but didn't back down. Instead, he lunged at Tom, knocking him to the ground. The flashlight went flying, and we were plunged into near darkness, the only light coming from the broken window. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and rushed to help Tom. I slashed at the man's arm, forcing him to let go of Tom. He staggered back, clutching his arm, and then turned and bolted back through the window, disappearing into the night. We stood there, shaken and breathless. The house was eerily silent, except for the distant sound of the intruder's footsteps, fading into the woods. We knew it would be at least 20 minutes before the police arrived. We quickly checked all the windows and doors, ensuring they were locked and secured. Tom and I sat in the living room, our eyes glued to the shattered window, listening for any signs of the intruder's return. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could see the tension in Tom's face. Finally, the sound of approaching sirens broke the silence. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees as the police arrived. We rushed outside, waving them down, and quickly explained what had happened. The officers searched the area but couldn't find any sign of the intruder. They took our statements and assured us they would keep a patrol car in the area for the rest of the night. After the police left, we knew we couldn't stay there. The sense of security was gone. We quickly patched up the broken window with some boards and tape we found in the garage, packed our bags, and left the cabin. As we drove away, the dawn was beginning to break, casting an eerie light over the lake. We never found out who the man was or why he targeted the lake house. The rest of the holiday was a blur of anxiety and restless sleep. We stayed at a nearby hotel for the remainder of our trip, unable to shake the feeling of unease. The 4th of July had always been a time of joy and celebration, but that night changed everything. The lake house, once a sanctuary, now held an air of unease. We still visit, but we're more cautious, more vigilant. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the leaves outside keeps us on edge. The sense of carefree celebration is gone, replaced by a lingering fear of the unknown. Thanks so much for listening to Nightmare Narratives. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be reminded when we post a new video every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. If you have a story you'd like to hear read on the channel, email it to us at officialnightmarenarratives@gmail.com, and you might just hear your story featured in a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.